What is going on, everyone? Welcome back for part 3 of Why California Sucks, or Why California's Failing, whichever you prefer. I know sucks is sort of a harsh word, and if you're one of the people that's been complaining about me using that word, saying that it's too harsh, I'd just like to say, it sucks to be you, I'm gonna keep using it. Back to the Golden State. It should be no surprise to anyone that keeps up with current affairs, California spends a lot of time in the various news cycles for its ever-growing list of failures and questionable moves. The facts are pretty straightforward. I mean, you can overcomplicate it in anything, and give arguments because you've overcomplicated, but let's just simplify it. California brings in more money than any other state. California, by itself, is the 5th largest economy in the world, and that's as of 2018. It'll probably pass Germany in the next few years. So, like I said, let's look at it a simple way. They bring in far more than any other state in the union. They tax the residents more than any other state, yet they still suck and they still have budget shortfalls. Some of the wealthiest neighborhoods and people in the country live in the Golden State. And California has some of the best wine country, but they also have... Number 10, failing schools. California has some of the best university and trade schools in the country, and that's the end of the good news when it comes to education in California. California teachers are the 5th highest paid in the nation, but California students rank 46th in math and 49th in reading. Now, they're not just overpaid because they're overpaid. They live in a very expensive state, so of course, a government employee, state, county, whatever, is going to get higher than, say, someone in Mississippi. So that's understood. But the thing is, California scored 45th in the nation's report card for public schools. Getting educated in California is an uphill battle. Here's the thing. California teachers, for the most part, are excellent at what they do. But when the school districts are so broken that teachers have to buy pencils with their own money, there's a problem. And it normally has to do with the budget and who's managing that budget and what the state's giving them. You need supplies, you need equipment, you need computers, you need things like that to educate kids. It's not just the teacher. I mean, California does have the lowest per pupil spending in the nation. So you got to expect bad scores, right? Number 9, the exodus. The amount of people leaving California is starting to be a problem. There's been a steady flow of outward migration in California for about a decade. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less. Anyway, the real problem with that is who's moving. For the most part, it's the middle class. The middle class makes up a majority of the population and a majority of the people paying those high taxes we've spoken about. I think like any business, you can charge a premium when everyone wants your product. In this case, California is charging a lot in taxes, that's the premium, because a lot of people wanted to live there. That was their product. These days, the product, California's lifestyle, isn't as popular as it used to be. I think it's only going to get worse. Like anyone, governments get addicted to the tax revenue, and it is going to be hard when they have to take a look and say, we need to lower these taxes, or it's just going to be us sitting here staring at, an open desert with a nice beach. Number 8, power prices. Like everything else in this state, electricity is expensive. Residential customers in California pay about 50% more for electricity than the national average. This is, of course, to private companies that we sort of touched on in video 1 of this series. We talked about how all the utility companies are just horrible. They're run by horrible people and they do horrible things to their customers. Now, they can get away with it because they have a monopoly on whatever area of the state you live in. Nebraska is the only state that generates electricity entirely by publicly owned power systems. As of 2018, the Nebraska statewide average electricity price is the 14th lowest rate in the country. That's based on the latest federal figures. Nationally, electricity costs 15% more than it does in Nebraska for, that's the average, 15% more. Across the entire country, Hawaii has the highest electricity rate with 26.7 cents per every kilowatt hour. Louisiana has the lowest. I don't know how they pulled that off, but it's only 7.75 cents per kilowatt hour. California is 16.50 cents for every kilowatt hour. So when you're doing your budget for moving to California, don't forget about $250 a month for electricity, or $100 for electricity and $100 for candles, or you can just buy a pair of night vision goggles and rough it. Number 7, Mother Nature. Mother Nature hates California more than the average hardcore Republican does. We know this because what happens every single year. You have wildfires racing up and down the hills outside of Los Angeles and the Bay Area every single year. A good friend of mine actually lost her house in one of those fires 2 years ago. I think she owned it less than a year at the time and just burnt down to the ground. She updates the rebuild on her Facebook all the time, and I think she's finally getting ready to move back in. Anyway, this is 2 years later. Every year this happens and they never seem prepared. prepared. I used to watch them fight the fires on the news when I lived in Southern California, and they always had a fire chief on that acted like, wow, who knew the whole hillside could go up in flames like that? That's amazing. Never saw that one coming. I know we had the same thing happen last year and the year before that and the year before that, but wow, boy, do I have egg on my face. We were not prepared for this one this year. I remember these big planes they would have that would scoop water out of lakes and the ocean as they kind of land and just scoop up water and then take off right away. And then they go fly over and dump the water on the flames and kind of help, fight the fire. And they would always say that they're borrowing them from Canada. They borrowed 2 of them from Canada and they sure are effective. Here's an idea, California. If they're so effective, why don't you buy some super scoopers of your own? Maybe, I don't know, 6. Spread them around the state or something. Who knows? Quit borrowing them from Canada. Anyway, after the fire season, you have the rainy season, which isn't that big of a deal. They don't get much rain, but all those hillsides that got burnt out, well, they don't have any vegetation holding the earth in place anymore. Every time it rains, all those people who almost got their house torched spend most of their time wondering if this year's mudslide is going to actually wash their house out to sea. Number 6. Mother Nature on steroids. Wildfires and mudslides are bad enough, but a serious earthquake can be devastating. I've been in a bunch of small earthquakes and 3 big ones. I was in the military during one of them and had to guard a building that had collapsed in California. People were trying to loot this building that was almost completely leveled. It still had bodies in it. It was summer. It was hot, and they'd been there for about a week. It was rough. California is part of the Ring of Fire. In case you don't know what that is, the Ring of Fire is a major area in the basin of the Pacific Ocean where many earthquakes and volcanic eruptions occur. About 90% of the world's earthquakes occur along the Ring of Fire. The Ring of Fire is a direct result of tectonic plates moving and colliding with other plates. This causes the earthquakes and all kinds of nonsense that goes with it. Volcanic eruptions. Who knows? On top of all that, you have sea levels rising, which could bring even more chaos in play within the next 50 or 80 years. None of us will probably be around then, but still. Number 5, crime. Finally get to crime. I know a lot of you have been waiting for it. California is no stranger to crime. California has some of the worst crime in the country. Back in the day, if you avoided Compton, Oakland, and maybe Watts, you were pretty much safe, kinda. These days, those places are considered sort of tame compared to other cities like Fresno, Long Beach, or Stockton, California. If you want to see some violence, go to any one of those cities or be at an all-you-can-eat place when they run out of wings with my cousin's ex-wife. The rampant gang activity in the state gets even worse with each passing year. Los Angeles is considered the gang capital of America. California's violent crime rate is the 9th highest in the nation. They have 4 of the top 10 most violent cities in the United States. Number 4, breaking up a state. In my life, I have seen, I think, 3 or 4 movements to break up California. Sometimes 3 states, they want to break into 6 states. It's never going to happen. Every time they bring it up, I've heard someone say, it's going to happen this time, and they act like they have some insider information on it. They know. And then it never even makes it to the ballot. On top of that, the LA area and the San Francisco Bay Area pretty much make all the money for the state. What does Northern California have to make money on? Water and weed? That's about it. But the breaking up of California isn't the real issue. The issue is parts of the state feel that their interests aren't being represented. California is a one-party state, Democrat, with a few representatives and towns that lean right. Well, very right in some cases. So there's this frustration and an anger that their government isn't working for them. It's not just California. Oregon has a very liberal western section near Portland and Salem, and then you have the eastern section of the state, which is very Republican. That is the biggest obstacle I think this country, not just the states, faces. People feeling that they're not being represented. It's always been that way, but it's gotten worse over the years. Politicians don't bend anymore. They're there to advance what their people want, make deals, negotiate, do some politicking. They don't do it anymore. They stick to what the party tells them to do because that's where all the money is. The money tells them what to do, and that's it. There's no more negotiating. It's either black or it's white. They've eliminated gray. And it's both sides. It's not just one side, it's both of them. And then each side has the zealots. You know them. You could see them in the comment section of almost any video. I don't care if I did a video on Crayola taking periwinkle out of the 32 box. People would blame it on the other side. It's the liberals. They're removing the periwinkle, or it's they need to remove the brown one because it's racist. Everyone has it. It's just weird. Do nothing but making it worse. Number 3, no fix in sight. The Golden State has all these things that need to be fixed as far as the middle class and poor residents go, but they ain't making the right moves to help those people out. California is home to roughly 1/3 of the nation's welfare recipients, despite having just 12% of the nation's population, and nearly 1 out of every 4 California residents is considered poor. Now, we sort of touched on this before, but we need to look at the cause and the lack of solution a little bit deeper. Now, to be fair, as far as the welfare recipient thing goes, they don't lead the country in the per capita. That would be Oklahoma. But moving on. So what's the problem, or at least one of the main problems? When businesses leave, the middle class shrinks, and many who once had jobs lose them, obviously, and a portion of them slip into the poor category because they can't find another job, or they can't find one that pays as well as maybe the company they'd been with for 10 or 15 years. Why are businesses leaving? 40 years of hostility towards business chases them out. High utilities and labor costs chases them out. Excessively punitive regulations, absolutely. Problems with housing affordability for the employees, absolutely. These things all make for a very toxic environment for businesses. So in a nutshell, they've chased all these companies out with all their BS. Here's why there's no fix in sight. California is lagging behind in this new trend of reshoring jobs. Reshoring jobs means basically companies are moving back that have been overseas for some time. So they're coming back, they're just not coming back to California. All the issues that I mentioned before are sending companies to basically Texas and things like that. So it's like there's a solution out there, but they're making no moves towards that solution. Number 2, the harbors. California has 11 shipping harbors or ports, whatever you want to call it, and they have 2 major ones in LA and Long Beach, California. They're 2 of the largest shipping harbors in the country, and they're right next to each other. Unless you live or work in that area, you probably wouldn't know the difference. If you look at them from a map, they look like one big thing, but they're actually 2. So why is this a problem? They're both far too big and sort of unmanageable. Far more bad things come through these harbors than any state border in the country. The amount of containers that flow through these harbors is crazy. About 16 million containers are offloaded in California harbors every single year, with about 80% of them going through LA and Long Beach harbors. It is impossible to open up each one of these and inspect it. One harbor official said that they estimate they only catch about 5, maybe 10% of the illegal stuff that ends up in these harbors. And number 1, the drugs. Californians have always been known for their ability to be high most of the time. Obviously, that's a stereotype, but it's not much of a stereotype. California's history with drugs is legendary. It started in California in the 1950s and 60s with the weed and hasn't stopped leading the country in the latest drug trends, except for maybe that whole oxy thing that happened in like Kentucky and Ohio and West Virginia. Everything else, they've been ahead of the pack. Why is this? For one thing, it's the culture. Another thing, it's the lifestyle. And third, it's the steady supply. You have the border and then the before mentioned harbors. There are too many ways to get things into California. It doesn't matter if you build a wall 30 stories high with a moat that has sharks with frickin' laser beams in it. They will find a way to get what is in demand into the United States, through California most of the time. Back in the 1980s, it was coming through Florida across the water, which is far more difficult to get over than a wall in the middle of the desert. The fact is, as long as there's a demand, money to be made, and people willing to do it, drugs will find their way into the Golden State. Nothing we can do about it. Maybe just kind of slow it down a little bit. All right, so that is my last top 10 reasons California sucks. That was 3 videos on this. It was pretty interesting. California does suck. There's no getting around it. They've got some work to do. They got good people there, most of them leaving, but good people in California. It's too bad. It's just sucked forever. That's why I left. Anyway, don't forget all the links below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Tell me what you thought. What do you think I missed? I'm sure there's a bunch of them. Leave it down in the comment section. Buy a t-shirt. Hit that bell notification thing so you know when I upload. There seems to be a problem with that. Anyway, everybody have a great day. Be nice to each other.